The history of the Caribbean is a fascinating one. There are many different islands that make up this region, each with their own unique culture and history. But there are some key periods that stand out in the history of the Caribbean. Let's take a look at some of them. First, we have the pre-Columbian societies. Yes, believe it or not, before Christopher Columbus arrived in the Caribbean, there were people living there, in fact. There were several different groups of people living in the Caribbean at the time. The Lucayan people lived in the Bahamas, the Arawak and Carib people lived in the Greater Antilles, and the smaller islands were home to various other groups. These societies were largely peaceful and egalitarian, but unfortunately, they were about to change drastically when Columbus arrived in the Caribbean in 1492. He brought with him diseases that devastated the native populations who'd never even seen a Spaniard. Within a few decades, the native population had been decimated by diseases such as smallpox and measles, and those who survived were often enslaved or killed by the conquistadors. After the native populations were mostly wiped out, the Spanish began to colonize the Caribbean. They established settlements on many of the islands and began to grow crops such as tobacco, cotton, and sugar. To grow these crops, they needed a lot of labor, and so the Spanish began to import slaves from Africa to work on the plantations. This began the era of slavery in the Caribbean, and it would last for centuries. During the 1600s and 1700s, the Caribbean became a very important region for the trade of sugar. In fact, sugar plantations became the economic engine of the Caribbean. The sugar plantation system was a brutal one. The slaves who worked on the plantations were treated horribly and many of them died. But the profits from sugar were so great that it continued to be grown in the Caribbean for centuries. In the 1800s, the era of slavery began to come to an end. In 1834, slavery was abolished in the British Empire, which included many Caribbean islands. Other countries followed suit after that, and slavery was finally abolished throughout the Caribbean. But this did not mean that the Caribbean was ready for independence. In fact, during the 1900s, many Caribbean islands gained their independence from European powers. This was not always an easy process. However, many of the islands had been colonized by Spain, Britain, France, the Netherlands, and Denmark. And these European powers were not always willing to give up their colonies. For example, the Dominican Republic was under Spanish rule until 1865, Haiti was under French rule until 1946, and Jamaica was under British rule until 1962. During this time period, there were also many different independence movements throughout the Caribbean. Many of these movements were led by intellectuals and activists who wanted to see their countries become free from European rule. They faced many obstacles, including violence and oppression from the colonial powers. But eventually, most of the Caribbean islands were able to gain their independence. Today, the Caribbean is home to many different and vibrant nations. Each nation has its own unique culture and history, but they all share a common history of slavery, colonialism, and struggle for independence. The history of the Caribbean is a reminder of the struggles that many people have endured throughout history, but it is also a story of hope and resilience. The people of the Caribbean have a rich culture and history, and they continue to make important contributions to the world today. Thank you for watching this video about Caribbean history. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, comment below to let me know what you thought. Also, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you next time.